Hiya there, guys. This is David from Mo Stop Mo. Hope everyone's doing well. I have been quarantining just like everyone else, and Mo Stop Mo has still been working on projects. And of course, to reiterate, the Mo Stop Motion Film Festival is still postponed. We do want to have this be an in-person festival. So with that being said, who knows when the next time we will all be in person? And even then, when we're allowed, are we really going to want to go out? So still weighing the pros and cons, just like the rest of the world. In the meantime, we are excited to continue to bring you guys podcast interviews from industry professionals in stop motion. We have some cool interviews lined up. Stop motion industry professionals ranging from cinematographers to directors to armaturists to set fabricators to experienced animators. Some cool interviews lined up, including the one we have for you today. These are the folks from Darkstar. Now, if you're not familiar with Darkstar, it is an Oakland-based project where these few guys, they kit bash a Star Wars series of toys, and they create new narratives, Afrocentric, futuristic narratives that seem to be debatably the tail wagging the dog of where maybe the Star Wars universe is going. I had a really great time going out and visiting these interesting fellas who basically had some great storytelling chops behind them and also a lot of very good artistic chops. One is sound designer and hip-hop musician. The other is largely known as a muralist, and if you're from the Oakland area, one of his more known murals is at Fruitvale Station, right on the station wall there. I got a chance again to meet these guys, and I got to see their studio and the kit bashing that they did. Really exciting, and I thought nothing more appropriate than on this May the 4th than to bring you the folks from Darkstar. So, here we go.
This is Korise, Darkstar Universe, producer and animator.
It's Refa 1. It's a bright day for a dark star, writer and builder.
All right, I'm in this studio now, and we're kind of just south of Oakland. This is a nice space to have because, you know, like you were saying, you're from Oakland originally, and
Yep.
Finding space is like one of the bigger challenges of being an artist in general, unless your space is, you know, the canvas outdoors like yours is. Yeah. So talk about how you started kind of like getting into accommodating your art based on your needs. I know you guys both kind of came up as friends. How long have you guys known each other?
Only since the 90s. I can't remember exactly when we met, honestly, but definitely known each other since mid 90s.
Would you say Boogie Shack?
Yeah, so I had a hip hop group.
Okay.
Wasn't prepared to talk about that. But yeah, no, I used to be in a hip hop group called Boogie Shack, and we threw a lot of parties and hip hop shows back then, and Refa was always kind of like around in that space and building with different artists and showing his art and stuff like that. And he also I'll let you speak to some of your affiliations, but yeah, so we've known each other since then, and we just kind of realized here, you know, in the last 4 or 5 years that we both were kind of Star Wars nerds, or at least collectors of Star Wars. And I was doing these stop motion films with my son like 10 years ago with just his love of just finding Star Wars as a kid, you know, with the animated series Clone Wars. And he was getting into watching YouTubes and all these Lego stop motion animations and stuff like that. And he was like, Dad, I want to try this. And so I was like, all right. And so he started doing some research, and he was like, this is what we need. And started finding like these tutorials. And so I was like, well, we could do that. We could totally do that, you know. And like, we already got the audio side because I'm like audio nerd first. And so really he and I just, you know, went on this adventure and tried to figure it out. And we were doing everything on the kitchen table and the living room floor, and building stuff out of cardboard and styrofoam and just printouts from the internet, and really just kind of kit bashing. And we started off doing... Was kit bashing a thing yet? Because it's like, it's definitely, you go to a Comic-Con now or something and people know kit bashing, but if you like... Kit bashing has always been a thing. You know what I mean? It's always. I guess it's like a defined thing. You know, people would customize things. I would say it's more known what it is, I guess, but it's always been a thing. Right. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so we kind of set out to do these things, and we were doing recreations of Star Wars scenes. That was like our first couple films where like
you choose a scene and redo it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Frame by frame, and like we would just rip the audio from like YouTube or whatever. And actually we had the VHS tape, so I was actually plugging in the VHS player to my audio Pro Tools setup so I can actually capture the audio clean and then dub it in. And so that's kind of how we started, and so his collection started building, and here we are 10 years later, and Dad's still doing stop motion. My son's like 19, and he's like, "Man, you're still doing that, Dad?" You know, but it's cool. It's something that we share, you know.
So you've both always been a big fan of Star Wars or sci-fi in general.
Totally.
And it's kind of a nature-nurture thing, I'm sure, with your son, that he wanted to get into Star Wars and that stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was like we went to this garage sale, and this guy was selling like Star Wars in the package. It was like $2 a piece for like stuff in the package, which was like, I would love to see that guy again, but
yeah.
But you know, I bought my son about $40 worth of Star Wars, and it just kind of went from there. My collection got thrown away when I was a kid, but when I left home, my dad threw my childhood collection away, or gave it away, I would say, to Salvation Army. So,
and it was
you know, it's like
collection.
starting over. It was a big collection, but you know, my son and I started collecting based on the characters that we wanted to see in our films. When we were doing these recreations, it was like, oh, we need that character. Let's go online and try to find it, or let's go to the flea market and try to find it. And so he really got into eBay, and eBay was like this whole other thing where we were like,
Evil Bay.
Yeah, we were like spending all this money, but then we would buy these big collections, and there was a bunch of shit in there that we didn't need, so we would just sell it. So I became like this eBay kind of guru of like buying and selling, and we had a really good run on eBay one year where it was like paid for a lot of bills. And
oh, really? Wow.
Paid for Christmas when we were celebrating Christmas back then, but yeah. It was really good, but so his collection actually outgrew his room at the time, and so we had to end up start boxing stuff up because it was just crazy. So
meanwhile, while you're doing that, you have your own thing going on, right?
Yeah, I think one thing that's interesting is that some of our origins are the same.
It sounded like he told me a little bit, but yeah, definitely.
So one, we both black fathers with sons, and that is the thing that kind of got us back into this, is our children.
Yeah.
When my son was really small, about the same time period, maybe a little before, my son's a little older, I didn't want him watching all the mainstream goofy stuff on TV, which is dumb. Teletubbies and Barney. I was like, get the hell out of here. We ain't watching that. So, you know, he wanted to watch some youth programming. So I found things that I grew up with, and I just wouldn't tell him it was old. I just put it on. Mm-hmm. So he liked the Thunderbirds.
Oh,
right?
Cool.
It's not exactly stop motion animation.
But it's sets and props and story and sci-fi and all that fun stuff.
So he was feeling the marionette stuff, and he was like, yo, I want to make my own spaceship. So we started grabbing styrofoam and other things, kit bashing, I guess you could say, and scratch builds. And I would build him his own dioramas and sets. He would work and build them with me. And that's pretty much, it was also a way.
Like, what age are you were saying, like maybe around 10, 9?
No, much younger.
Okay. Same with you, younger?
He was 9.
Okay, so
yeah,
how old
my
was your
son
son?
was like 9, 8, 9.
I mean, it's as soon, like, as you're exposing these things, it's like...
I have pictures of him doing it while he was like 5, 6 years old. You know, like, they were really small.
Okay.
Because the idea was that we don't have to run out and spend all this money on toys. You have an imagination. We can build the world that you want.
Yeah.
And so he would work with me. I would show him how to do it. We would build it, make pillars out of, toilet paper tubes and paper towel tubes, and just build these sets for his, little army men. And I think we had some little miniature Star Wars figures that were like the size of like your little army men, army builder kits, that type of thing.
Okay.
I think with that too, they just appreciate it more because it's something that you're able to do together, and it's exciting for them to learn a new skill. And they're like, he just wanted to do this stuff all the time. And so it got to the point where we were like, we kind of outgrew like doing the recreations, and he wanted to kind of do his own stories. And so I was like, well, that's a little more in depth, like we actually have to do the voice acting and like all of this stuff, the sound design, all of this stuff.
And you said to me that you kind of learned more production through this process, or you were you had your group, so you knew
I
audio,
was like,
and you were doing recording.
Yeah, no, I
and
was
stuff
doing
like that.
audio for years, and so I already knew like the audio side of what was needed for it.
Right.
Because I think just before I got into doing this with my son, I had scored a film. And so I kind of knew a little bit about it, but I had no idea how to edit stop motion or video, period. So I taught myself on iMovie, and we had a little point and shoot camera. And so we started digging into more like the Star Wars lore and comic books and expanded universe. And so some of the stop motion, we created a series called New Republic Old Empire, which is a 4-part series, and it's on the Dark Star universe YouTube.
And this is about 2010, you were saying?
It started 2010, and we ended about 2012
okay.
in terms of that whole series. And it was based on a universe after the Death Star had blown up. Like, what happens to Luke after that? Like, what happens to the Republic? It turned into the New Republic. What happened? And so there's tons of
so
novels.
You were jumping on that kind of story. I mean, this is well before they released any of this stuff. Now
this was before they released like any of the Rise of Skywalker and what's the first one that they did? Force Awakens. Yeah. It was before all of that. Yeah. So which made all of this old lore actually not canon anymore. There was a lot of really good stories that were created, novels and writers in comic books. And so based on those narratives, we created our own story with inserting characters from those novels and comic books into our story. Okay. And creating our own scenarios. And so it became, more set building, more audio, and I did like 90% of the voices. Mm-hmm. So I became this voice actor overnight. Right. And then my son would do all the droid and alien parts, and then I might be able to talk somebody else into doing a couple other parts. But, it was just really fun, man, honestly. And it was... So when I look back at it now, I'm like, I kind of cringe on, like, I had no idea about frames per second or anything. I'm just trying to make it look kind of half-ass real and not just pictures,
sure.
You know what I mean? Uh-huh. And so I'm like, okay, I could totally do that better. And so
that was kind of your first attempt doing like a stop motion, not only just like in general, but like trying to make a story and make it like you're looking at it from a lens perspective now.
Yeah. And it was like, I would say one of the first stories that I wrote, or he and I wrote, and then I would say the last two that we did, he mainly wrote the story and I kind of guided.
So you're still working with your son on these things, or?
You know what? He comes down to the workshop. Right? He's 19. He'll come through and sand on some stuff and glue some stuff together and kind of help out when we need, sure. To move sets and everything. But right. It's not his thing anymore, right. But yeah.
And is your son still involved in this type of thing or no?
In a different capacity. My son is more interested in doing some of the production stuff like music. He makes music.
Okay.
And he likes to make scores and things like that.
They still have the love for like sci-fi and Star Wars and stuff like that, or is it?
Most definitely. Matter of fact, he took me to see the last movie at Lucasfilms. So he has an inside connection where he works with ILM.
Oh, really?
He's affiliated with ILM.
Okay.
And so I've been able to go through those studios and check out some interesting things. Just through him, he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna hook you up." I'm like, "Whoa,
nice."
So, but directly related to Dark Star universe. Not as much. He's more somebody comes into my workshop and like, look at my old ass dad in here playing with these toys. But he thinks it's cool. He still thinks it's cool, but he's just busy with other things.
Sure.
But he's still a creative person.
How old's your son now?
He's 22.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are your sons, do they know each other? Or
They've met, yeah. Okay. They're not like buddies or anything, but
because it's like they have, like, just if you guys have had similar pasts, they have similar pasts, and it's kind of interesting because the way you kind of just...
your daughter, though?
Yeah, they know each other. Yeah,
okay.
My daughter, and because she's older. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, she's 20. They're about the same age.
So as you guys are kind of running these parallel kind of lives to a degree, artists also doing this kind of kit bashing, working with your sons, where does your collaboration start? Because I know while you were researching, I think you had noticed some stuff that you were putting online, and I'm not exactly sure how it worked out, chicken and egg, but...
Well, we got mutual friends. I mean, I think, he had been working on some diorama stuff over here. I think it was kind of Hoth related. Mm-hmm. And funny, just serendipitous, I was working on some too. And we have mutual friends.
You guys are doing this at the same time?
Yeah. Just about, yeah.
But not at all talking about it.
No.
I didn't even know, as long as I known him, that he was a nerd like that. Like, I just didn't. We know each other from hip-hop and doing stuff. Yeah. A lot of people know me as spray can artist in the street, at an art gallery I used to direct, and just doing other things, more political, have you. Mm-hmm. And so people don't know that persona in terms of me. And I didn't know that about him. I was like, this dude do music, he throw parties, he does production. That's it.
Yeah.
And so the first time I came over here and I saw it, I just laughed. And then he heard about my stuff and he kind of laughed too. Like, I'd have never figured you would be that kind. I was like, yeah, man. You know what I'm saying? Star Wars nerds in the hood.
So wait, let me just hold on for that for a second. Mm-hmm. So I was saying earlier, and generally speaking, nerd culture hasn't become mainstream culture until maybe the last several years. I mean, like the Marvel movies, the Star Wars movies. Was this kind of like just something you didn't talk about, or was it just like it just wasn't on the forefront because you're doing other things? Because now it's like it seems like people will connect almost immediately over like this type of cultural thing, pop cultural thing versus like, I don't know, the news. So you guys discover that about each other because you never really talked about that before. I mean, you guys knew each other for a while, and all your discussions and interactions that had never really been a conversation or anything like, did you check out this new thing or none? Like,
I would say this, for me, when you grow up, for myself personally, when you grow up kind of poor working class, there may be some nerdy things you into as a kid. You playing with toys, you collecting robots, Transformers, comic books, etc. But it gets to a point where now you got some adult responsibilities. You can't afford to spend your money on that. Mm-hmm. You also can't really afford to spend your time focusing on, it's a luxury. Mm-hmm. When my son came along, it afforded me the opportunity to work on some nerdy things from my youth because now I got a kid, so I can do that with him. And it's quality time. I can justify going with him to the toy store or the flea market, picking up a few things
and not working about you anymore.
And working on a diorama.
Right.
And so it's not something that you really run around talking about because it's not at the forefront of what you're mainly doing with your life. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? From my point of view and my experience. So it wasn't that it was something that I was trying to keep under my hat. It just wasn't central in my life. But my son got older. By the time me and him connected with doing the dioramas, my son is in high school. Now I got a little more time to work on some crafty things that I want to do. Mm-hmm. And that was one of them.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, he had a couple posts on Instagram and I was posting some stuff on Facebook. And I don't even remember how the conversation started, but I was like, man, that's dope, man. We should do a build together. Like, I'm doing this. And we just started messaging back and forth. And then he came over and I had this, I had already kind of started this Hoth build. And he was like, man, let's do some stuff, man. I'm working on some stuff too. And then he brought his stuff over and then we just set up like 2 6-foot tables together and we were going to create this whole Hoth battle. And so we started going to the toy shows and flea
this is
markets.
After your boys are kind of older and out now?
Yeah, I mean, my son was, I think, and he was definitely in high school at that point.
Okay. So now that they're kind of finding their lives and their social interactions, you guys are connecting more and kind of jumping on this. Okay.
Yeah, and it eventually turned into like, well, let's, I got this kind of background in stop motion. I got this channel just sitting here for like the last 6-7 years that hasn't really anything been done with it, and it is a rabbit hole. And then I look back at it and I realized that there's like over 400 and something thousand views on one of our videos. I'm like, whoa. Because I hadn't looked at the channel in a long time. I was like, we should do something with this. And then, there's like 1,300 subscribers on that channel. And so we just repurposed it for Darkstar when we started, talking about the story with Darkstar.
So how does Darkstar start? You guys got together, you're building the Hoth set, you're figuring out you guys have a connection, this parallel type of thing. Darkstar comes about because of what?
So before we teamed up, I had the idea of this the Dark Star universe was kind of, a little bit of a play on words because I'm thinking of, darker melanated peoples. But I also, just like Korise, have a connection just for the aesthetic of the dark side. The Imperials just look cool.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
And so I was doing a lot of redesigns, my own customs and kit bashes. I wanted to make some art pieces. But when I would post them, I would write little story narratives that go with the photograph. And so these are just sets.
Diorama style
sets, or just sometimes not even a full diorama. It might just be a figure.
What's one of the first ones you did that with?
I did some stormtroopers where I kit bashed, did some head popping, threw some brothers' heads on there, and threw a little kind of like a cape to kind of look like a dashiki or with a little African print, and I put together some different army build regiments, and just had the characters having little stories. And I also did the TIE fighter with the African print on it. I think that's probably
the one that
notable.
we were just looking at over there.
One like that. There were some I did before that. But
those TIE fighters are almost perfect because that's like a canvas just for you to do whatever you want. That big flat surface.
Right. So the idea was to tell some science fiction story narratives that had a Star Wars aesthetic.
So not to jump universes, but you see a movie like Black Panther, where they're kind of taking technology and definitely coming at it from like an Afro cultural base, but that whole kind of the same evolution almost. And to jump back, then even like Star Wars now, trying to tell a story at least from the Black perspective, Finn's perspective. Do you feel like there's like the tail wagging the dog here, or what's do you feel like it's just like the same thing? Do you feel like it's there's a time where it comes about like you guys are both working on Hoth sets at the same time, and it just is the energy that's out there, or versus like you have been producing something and you're not paying attention and all of a sudden you have a viewership. Do you feel like there's been like a kind of your influence or their influence, or it's the time that it's supposed to happen? I know this is the bigger question of everything, but just throwing it out there.
I mean, I think it's some of both. From my point of view as being a visual artist, this is my background. Everything I do is from that perspective. So this has just been a lifetime trajectory of how I do work. It's not the first, even when I was building the things with my son, one of the first dioramas we built was an African style temple that's supposed to be in the future. And we used an ancient Kemetic, or Egyptian for those that don't know, a design aesthetic. So, I mean, it's been a part of my work way before Star Wars decided to go there. And definitely before the Panther movie came out. However, I can't say that those things weren't influencers in the sense that I saw Star Wars when it first came out. I mean, I'm that old. I can remember when the first, back in the 70s when that joint first came out. And also I read Black Panther in the 70s.
Right.
So, they definitely influenced some of my vision in that regard.
I'm going to go a little bit back. So you guys are building your Hoth set. You find out that you have like a channel and people are following it. You come up with this idea where you're deciding to start this narrative for Dark Star.
Yeah.
The first thing that you guys put out there is what?
We started with the branding. We were like, okay, we're going to do this. And,
So you were coming at this right off the bat as... Like,
yeah.
Is it like a product, or is it just like art movement? I mean, a little both.
It's always been about the film.
Okay.
It's always been about the film, but it expanded into a couple different things. Refa came up with a great story that's about a black admiral that defects from the Empire and his journey within that space. And so we immediately started diving into set building. Like, okay, what's the first set we're going to build? And we started building village pieces that were for this village that's going to be in this movie. And
so when you're talking about a village piece, it's like, I see the stuff that's up on display here. This kind of reminds me of...
Kind of Tatooine-ish.
Tatooine,
but,
yeah.
With the...
different colors and...
Yeah, exactly. Definitely more on the Kemetic tip, kind of using the Star Wars aesthetic and mashing it together with ancient Kemet. And so we started building on some of those, and then we started building, he had already had this kind of structure that was made out of VHS tapes that he made for his son. Like, he built it for his son. It was supposed to be like this launch pad or something. And he brought it over, and I was like, this is cool. This is a great, starting piece. So I started, expanding on it. And it was like this thing that was like maybe 1 foot by 1 foot or something. And I started just expanding on it. And now it's like it's a 14-foot Star Destroyer hangar. Imagine the inside of a Star Destroyer and what that would look like. We built it out of VHS tapes. And I didn't even bring it out.
VHS tapes?
Everywhere.
Yeah. So basically, were you just like Craigslist and thrifting, or?
It started out with like, I got a few in the basement somewhere, or family members, and then we would go to flea markets and recycle reuse places, and we just started asking the community for donations, and it just expanded. I think the following year, after we decided we were going to embark on this journey and started building sets and ships and kit bashing and all that stuff, we came up with the idea of doing a diorama workshop with kids. And there's this yearly event that happens here in Oakland, West Oakland, called Life is Living, which is a really dope community event that features a lot of different community organizations that come out to show their art, whether it's dance or visuals or music or food or whatever. And there's all kind of different workshops that people can kind of plug into. And, thousands of people come to this event. It's in October, second weekend in October. We both were already kind of involved with the festival in years past. And my side was more the audio and he was doing visuals. So we were like, well, what if we do a diorama workshop, a Dark Star diorama workshop? And we can display what we have so far. And all we had really to show was pieces of the village and some really cool ships. And so we basically went out there with a couple bins worth of recycled material and led a workshop with about, 30 kids throughout the day that came and built different sets and structures and spaceships.
So what's the reason that you wanted to do this diorama workshop?
For me, I was like just super inspired by, there's this guy on YouTube that's called Nim's Universe. Frank, I forget his last name, but he does this diorama workshop every year at Star Wars Celebration. And he kind of gives them a template, and we're going to build this, and they kind of go, right? Uh-huh. So I was like, why don't we do something like that, but more on the recycle tip, because we're on the recycle reuse tip, so we're like, wherever we can find some stuff.
And that has always been the case, like when you're doing your stuff, it's always been the case?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would also say, similar to, what you had mentioned as we talked earlier, being the gatekeepers that share information.
Yeah.
I had been doing, I guess you can say, an unofficial workshop with my son, my nephew, and my niece. I actually have some photographs of them working on it. They're all like about 5-6 years old.
Cool.
They're all sitting around the table having hella fun painting a diorama that we put together with, just household materials and products. But the idea is to really encourage young people to have imagination and tell their own story. We're in the digital age where most young folks are just plugged into machines. And everything is already preset and pre-programmed for them, so they lack imagination. And being somebody from the African community, I understand, especially in a society that is oppressive, that imagination creates critical thinking, and critical thinking is going to help you solve your problems. So it's imperative that young people have imagination so they can imagine themselves in a world different than the one that we're in. And we're in the Trump era right now. That's crazy. Can you imagine yourself living in a world that's different? How do you get out of the situation and crisis that you're in?
Right.
And so art building and art making is part of that process.
Right.
And as an educator, because that's just my background as an art teacher, it's very important to exercise those tools with young people at an early age. And this was a fun way to do it. And it was also a fun way for us to talk about green and healthy living. So we can take household products, things that are very accessible to you, that don't come at a high cost. And you can have a lot of fun learning and create, like all of those things at one time.
Right.
It's ideal. And so that's why we're really promoting this whole idea of the diorama build. Because we want to create healthy lifestyles for youth.
And this year will be our 4th annual diorama workshop at that particular festival.
And is it the popularity is growing?
Definitely, it's growing overall. I mean, last year we took over the inside of, there's a rec center there, and first year we were outside and was great, but we needed more space and place to plug in, glue guns. And we really wanted to have a captive audience for when people come in, they see this massive diorama that we've created, the village, and as well as the Star Destroyer hangar. And we were able to bring out a lot of the other stuff that we were display pieces and things like that. We had a piece that was in the Oakland Museum, and it's in a case, and so we wanted to have, and so we kind of made it like our own Dark Star Con in a way where they could come, look at a diorama, check out what we're doing, get some information, take some pictures. Kids can participate in the workshop for a couple hours, and also we had a panelist of artists and folks that talk about speculative fiction.
So we ended up creating an Afrofuturist con to build community, because there's other minds out there that have some of the same agenda and motivations that we have. They may not be doing stop motion animation, but in the genre of Black speculative fiction and Afrofuturism, and people making comic books. We had people who are comic artists, designers, writers there, and other folks that are teaching even at a university level. Brother Kojo at San Francisco State, they're on our panel. And so it's about creating community, and it brings all the generations together. So we had children there as young as 5 years old, maybe even younger, all the way up to through elders, close to 70 years old.
So when you're talking about generations, that's like something I thought was interesting. You were talking about the shorts that you would show your kid when he was young. Are you also kind of imparting like certain films or influences to people? Like, what were the influences that you feel like drove you, and now you are kind of passing along at these conventions to different generations going forward?
So many, but there's a couple that stand out for me, and that would be Spaces to Place with Sun Ra, and The Spook Who Sat by the Door by Sam Greenlee. Okay.
And similarly, or?
I would say definitely both of those. Star Wars, even Star Trek in terms of the sci-fi elements, Blade Runner, that kind of thing.
And in terms of like Dark Star, are you more the writer, or who's the writer? Is it like, how does that work?
I'm the primary writer, but we collaborate.
Yeah.
So if I write something, he may have an idea that's great. I'll write it into the story. So we work together.
Okay.
And then I'm more of the animator, kind of director of the film, and I would say art director.
Okay.
He's more of the art director, and
but it sounds
I take his lead in terms of the art direction, because he's yeah.
But it sounds like it's like you kind of more are on sets.
Yeah.
Like the bigger kind of sets and props almost, and you're coming up with more of the look, maybe more of the detailed look of the branding, or even paint jobs and stuff like that. Am I kind of understanding?
It's a really...
Not that I mean to put you guys in categories. I just wanted to try to understand how you guys are working together.
Generally speaking, yes. But overall, in terms of the project, it's collaborative. I mean, to the point that you almost can't take too much individual ownership of anything. It's to the point like this. I might put a figure together. He might paint it the rest of the way. He might send it back to me after he paints it, and I may weather it.
Yeah.
The same with the ships. You can't. This ship's been worked on by 3 different people. Like, we all have different skill sets. One of the brothers in our group, Dre, is an amazing model painter and builder. He's also does some other things in terms of film and tech. But once we build and construct something, and we want that super detailed weathering on it, it goes to him.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? The same with the station here. I built the initial part of the framework. I brought it to Korise. He expanded it. We all worked on painting it. And then I do the decals.
He's the decal guy.
That's my thing. It's only because Korise don't want the headache.
I haven't really just dove into, really doing it. I remember doing decals with, I used to...
Like, you're talking about, you got to put the water and kind of get it in there.
Slide
and,
decals.
Yeah. Okay.
But he also does custom decals. I don't know that yet, how to create custom decals.
So, these detail works of, the writing and stuff like that.
That's all custom.
So, the writing, where's that font?
That's the Star Wars.
That's just the Star Wars.
Arabish, I think that's how you pronounce it.
Okay.
So it's a collaborative effort. Even with the writing, I may write something. Within that writing, he may have an idea to say, "Hey, I think this could be interesting." And then from the directing point of view, I may write a story one way, but that story may need to be told a different way on film.
Yeah.
And so we go back and forth. I come in and help do some of the voiced act kind of, training and stuff too with folks, just to give emphasis in terms of directing it. It's an overlapping of responsibilities. It's really a collaboration, which is also part of what Dark Star is. It's getting our community together in a creative way where we can tell our own story.
So when you guys do these workshops, do you find that they're building to aspire to your aesthetic, like the Afrofuturist look, or is it just kind of like they're just building? Or is
I'll say a little bit of both. I mean, we definitely encourage them to take from what we've already done, but also just use their mind and be creative and use their imagination. And kids, they come up with amazing things with just very little.
Are you scouting him like this person might be good for set building if we need
Well,
something?
I
Or
think initially,
is that a little too young?
Initially when we started the workshop, we were like, we need more hands, and like what better way to have like kids actually contribute to the film and build sets. And so there's a couple pieces that are part of our collection that were started by youth in our workshops, but most of them want to just take their sets home. So it was like, that was the trade-off. We had to like, okay,
Is there a way that you could say it's like build a set and it will be in the next Dark Star and then that's enough for them?
Initially, that's what we said, but the kids don't
at the end
really
of the day,
care.
they
want to
it.
just take it home.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, the workshop was a couple hours. So in retrospect, trying to finish a diorama piece in a couple hours is really hard. So, we encourage them to take it home. Like if they didn't get a chance to paint it or something like that, well, take it home, get some color,
So will your relationship with these kids like be past the workshop? Like you'll be in touch and stuff like that? Or is it... I mean, I know like building community in general, that's what you want.
Some
but
of
I'm just
them,
wondering
it was like
how
our
much...
friends brought their families and things like that. So yes and no, and some of it was just families that were attending the festival that were like, "Hey, this is great.
Sure.
Can I drop my kid off here?" And like,
Yeah.
And we're looking for it to grow. So I mean,
definitely.
Well, that's the thought too.
Ultimately,
like,
we
build this
want
community.
to even have fans that have never met us creating things and taking pictures and submitting it where we can show some fan art. Or even putting together some contests and competitions. But we're definitely scouting in terms of ideas. We're looking for people who will want to work with us, particularly locally. Yeah. And we're not against child labor. But
well, it's the American way, right?
There's a couple of pieces that we have where they were started at the workshop where kids were putting the wall putty on there. They know they're not taking that home. And we're going to get to push it past the finish line. Yeah. But we're also in our, I guess you could say, infancy in terms of Dark Star animation being finished. Because when we first started, we didn't have any of the animation finished. The majority of the posts that we put up on Instagram when we first started were sets that we were working. A lot of works in progress. It's like, hey, here's an idea. This is what our trajectory is. And now you get to witness some of the behind the scenes. So much of the posts that people will see on our Instagram and Facebook are works in progress. There are many things on there that are finished too, but they get to see the behind the scenes, see us working. We really want to inspire other folks to get in this community and work and build, tell your story. And so we're hoping that what we do will inspire that, particularly with young people.
So in telling your story and the short that you guys have submitted for Mo Stop Mo, and talk a little bit about that production.
Sure.
How big of a crew? And sometimes people are like, oh, how long does that take? It's like, it depends. How big of the crew?
I hate that question, honestly.
I do too,
That's
because...
I hate it. Because it's like, you can't put a time on it.
Yeah.
You honestly, it's like, unless you're really jotting down your hours, and I can't even say. Because even based on just the set building alone, I don't know.
Right.
I could tell you it probably took me about 4 days to animate it, maybe.
I'm going to give you a broad question. From the idea of starting to tell the story of this one defector to actually producing that first story.
Yeah.
What was the time frame? Like date-wise?
Shit, 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah.
I mean,
we work on this on our spare time.
Yeah. So
no, I mean,
like the set building process.
My first film took me 7 years in the basement of 3 different houses, and I taught at a school in Chicago, and it was like it moves around. You get that shot, and then you're like, all right. And I was shooting on film too, so
right.
But it's like that's how some of this type a thing takes. It's like spare time.
Totally.
So,
I mean, you know, the set building process has definitely been over the last 3 years in getting to the point, because it's a learning process too. I mean, we're trying to take it to the level of, say, a Leica or Star Wars and how they would build some of some miniature sets. So in terms of that, there was a lot of learning that I know I had to have, and Refa as well. But I think with Refa's expertise as coming in as a visual artist and knowing paint and how to really apply it in that aspect, I would yield to his expertise, and then on the other side, he would yield to my expertise in terms of the foundation of the filming itself and like what we need to really create. You know, it's different between building a diorama and a set for a, you know, stop motion animation. So and so we had to actually create things that were modular and that were a little open so we can actually get a camera in there. And it was a little bit of learning curve on both sides. But I think, you know, definitely it's been a 4-year process. I mean, we just finished our first short back in maybe, was it October? Just before our last workshop, we had released the first animation.
Yeah.
And it was only like a minute and a half. And then by January, we had expanded it another minute or so. I just was like, okay, I'm gonna shoot this quick scene, and he wrote another section of it. And so, because we were gonna be in the Black and Brown Comic Arts Festival, and so we wanted to have it to be a little longer, so we expanded it to 3.5 minutes. And so that particular version, it took a long time to animate it, and then there's the whole audio and
effects and all
getting
that kind
with
of
the voice actors and stuff like that. And I have a music studio here too, so we did everything here pretty much, you know.
Well, I guess that's my next question. We're talking about spare time. We're talking about using what we have as resources.
Yeah.
So this is kind of more of a passion project right now. I don't want to just give it a general term, but it's like, how do we keep this going?
Well, we have a GoFundMe, so you could check out our GoFundMe at Dark Star Universe. Donate. All the funds go to our workshop and to our film project, and really being able to continue what we're doing. We're looking for partners and people that want to contribute on the larger level to see this produced as actual film, a full length.
Full length, you're talking, you want to do like a feature.
We'd love to, something on the lines of a Thunderbird or a Leica type film. I would love for Leica to pick this up and see the value in what we're doing and see the market and create something, even Lucasfilm as well, Right. But this is a story it's kind of set in the Star Wars universe, but it's its own thing in terms of the story and the character association. And
you guys have been writing the story for a while.
Yeah.
So the story that you've been writing, basically, if we're just going to take a couple of examples, it seems a little bit of a combination of Force Awakens and Mandalorian.
In terms of the
Star Wars universe and like the character motivation, again having a black character as a central character, and just the idea of seeing what's going on and going away from that the Republic becoming the Empire.
Yeah, timeline wise, our story would probably fit in the timeline of Rogue One.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the Empire is new.
Yeah. And this is where people are just kind of figuring out, oh man, this is turning into something that I didn't buy.
Right.
Yeah.
Without, when people come into the Dark Star story through this new animation, they're coming in pretty much to the middle of our movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At some point, when we get our resources we need to, we'll probably tell the story from its beginning.
So you are kind of following the Lucas thing. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what... whether he intended that or not.
Yeah, it wasn't our intention. I think we aim to just do a quick short because we're practicing the craft at the same time. We're learning. Mm-hmm. And even myself, not to digress too much, but just because I came with my professional visual art background didn't mean that I was an expert the visual art. This is different than painting a mural or a painting.
Yeah.
Learning how to paint small miniature figures has
So
been
you
a
never
challenge.
worked on that scale before? Because you're working murals. You don't have your canvas is the world.
I've worked on it in the sense that I've built models as a child, but I wasn't a professional model builder. So it's a whole nother experience where you're just painting something really quickly versus, oh, I'm going to go in and do pre-shading. Oh, because I was doing the shading after the fact. Oh, there's a pre-shading? What's that? So it's been an exciting learning experience. And I think, you know, as we tell this story, people will come to see some different things. You know what I'm saying? See some different things that's not like what they see in the mainstream movies. And the motivations of some of the characters being a little different than what they've seen in some of the mainstream movies. That's what we're hoping to do.
Yeah, and our hero hasn't even entered our story yet. This is just one little peek in the window of the larger kind of narrative. So, you know, the short that we just did, that's, you know, now 3.5 minutes. It's really about a small group of kind of a garrison of resistance type crew that are on this space station kind of out in the outer rim, and they're trying to maintain their section of the outer rim, but
dealing
there's
with
this
the repercussions of what's been going on.
Right, and regrouping,
corridors,
and so they find themselves kind of under this unknown threat, so that everybody's kind of scrambling to kind of figure out what's going on. Is it really a threat, or is it just, you know, something, you know, is it a false alarm or whatever? So what you're seeing is, you
Kinda
know,
like what's happening right now with this whole coronavirus.
right.
It's like you really get to see, like, this is, you could watch people right now to get some good acting examples of like how people are going to act in an unknown situation.
True. So the larger narrative hasn't actually even been told yet. And the bigger
So how long
story.
is this, like, I know you said you have a feature idea, but if you had to say, you know, like, no, this is what you are going to have to work with in terms of this time frame or this story, like, how long is your story? Or if you can't answer that question, if you had to cut this off and say you only have one more production to do, what story would you tell?
I think it's probably going to be our main story about our main character, Admiral Namo.
So okay.
And Asan. So, you know, Admiral Namo, without giving the story away too much,
Right.
was a part of the Republic. He was a Republic naval officer. And so that gives you an idea, just timeline, how close it was, you know, to the Empire. He ultimately becomes part of the Empire. And then we also have a Jedi named Asan, right? And the trial she's going through just, you know, at the end of the Clone Wars. So that would be our main story. So this one isn't really separate that we're telling. It's just part of the middle.
Sure.
You're coming into the second act of the movie.
Right.
But as our next episode that we're working on now is going to introduce our main character. So the story we're telling is connected. And they're about to touch.
Yeah, you have like a whole universe and a Bible and how everything relates to each other. It's like, it's all there. But it's just a matter of like how you're going to tell it, basically.
Yeah. You know, it's really up to our fans out there.
Okay.
Hit us at the GoFundMe. You want to see this movie? We want to make it.
Right.
Have you thought about doing it episodic, or do you want to do it as one full piece? Like, how do you want people to digest your stories?
You know, right now our goal is to do smaller bites with the shorts. And that way, because we're in that world of everything's kind of, people's attention spans are really, you know, it's really like that 1 minute kind of Instagram vibe. So we've been making smaller, or looking to make, you know, shorter clips to kind of give people peeks in the window of like what we're really doing.
Yeah.
The goal is to make the larger film, but I think we'll continue to make, you know, shorts, anywhere from a minute and a half to like 3 minute shorts.
So with your fan base right now, you said you had noticed you walked away from your followers and you came back and you had a ton of followers. Like,
Yeah.
How has it grown since, and like what has that
It's
meant for
funny
you guys?
because, you know, I started that channel back in 2009, and 10, 11 years later, there's like tons of followers. Well, I wouldn't say followers, but views on this one particular film, which was the last film that my son and I wrote together. It actually, he was like, he didn't want it to be very serious and connected to any particular thing or a whatever. So, because we did this whole 4-part series, and he was like, let's just do something funny. And so he wanted to make this story about 2 stormtroopers ditching their duty to go to the fight. You know, the Galactic Gladiator. They were like, man, I want to go to the Galactic Gladiator. let's ditch our pose. We'll be back before the changeover.
Yeah.
Let's go see the fight. I got some tickets, and so they're on their way to try to go see this fight. But when they finally get there, the fight's over.
Oh.
So, but it was it was this funny little story, but people liked it so much. It's got like over, last time I checked, it was like 400 and something thousand views on it or something like that, which is crazy. And so a lot of the folks that were on that channel back then were kids. And so now they're adults, and they're like, hey, it's cool to see that you're still doing stuff. Like, we get comments on our new stuff that we've been putting up. Because I was also doing kind of behind the scenes stuff back then with my son. It was like, oh, this is how we made this. And people were really interested because we would get a lot of comments. Yeah. And same thing now. And so I was like, okay, now our workshop is expanded. And, we got this garage. And, so why not do some kind of tutorials? And that's the whole point of our workshop, is like to share the knowledge and to let kids know that they can actually build some cool stuff out of just things that they can find in their home. And so, I started putting out little 1-minute kind of tips on how we do certain things, and tips and tricks of not necessarily the stop motion, but just more set building.
Sure.
And our fandom comes from all over the place. Yeah. I mean, we have people that we're fans of in terms of their work, sometimes see our work and they're feeling it. So Donald Asen, who's on that new Resistors animation, right? Is Resistance or Resist?
Yeah, Resistance.
Right. We did a custom of his ship, because we're fans of the toy still.
Sure.
Hasbro need to step it up a little more because they didn't make any vehicles for that series. They made some of the characters, but I was sitting around. I was like, you know what? I'm finna make Hype Phazon ship. So we made one. Yeah. You saw in Dark Star Universe, and we took a figure and kit bashed it and made it look like Hype Phazon, painted it all up, and then we posted it, tagged him in it. He saw it, his feeling. He's reached out to us and even give us some tips. And come to find out, he's in the stop motion animation, and he's good at it.
Oh, really?
Right. I didn't ever know. I'm just used to seeing him as an actor on the show as one of the orderlies and nurses.
Right.
And here this dude is doing full on stop motion animation. And also, from a black perspective, he's a black stormtrooper. I'm not going to tell his story, but, he's reached out to us and said, giving us some tips and giving us some love on the work that we're doing. So It's growing all kind of directions, Do
you find it interesting that you're finding more people that are doing a similar thing, like across, like you're finding you're having more things in common with like more people who are doing something similar, or do you feel like...
Totally. I mean, there's a whole community of Star Wars nerds on Facebook that we're both, in a lot of those groups, and, we share our builds and stuff like that. And sometimes we'll get the occasional weird comment, and then we're like, okay, bro, just calm down.
Yeah.
Like
what?
But
like
Refa can kind of speak to it a little bit, but it's a little hate, you know what I mean? Because we're
unwoke, or is this kind of like...
I would just say that because we're bringing a black kind of aesthetic to the Star Wars universe, some people just are not down with that. Well, you know what I mean?
I think so. What was the actress from the newer sets of the Star Wars movies who had to kind of get off of social media? The Asian woman who...
Oh, Rose. Yeah.
She started getting a lot of hate just because I think people were... I mean, I don't know if it was an ethnicity
I think it was just her role.
Yeah.
The role that they gave her was just so weak that people were just like, making so much fun of her. I don't really know. I wasn't really following all that, but I think it might have just been the role that they gave her. I mean, Finn got a lot of, hate too as well. But just in that general, I think there's just so much love for that kind of the Star Wars aesthetic, and people want to build, and in terms of dioramas and creators and things like that out there. And so we're just trying to share in that community.
And you guys are getting out there. It's like you guys did an installation at the Oakland Art Museum just last year or 2 years ago?
2 years ago, we had an installation at the museum, part of the Hip Hop Respect exhibit that was there for 6 months.
Okay. Yeah, they had a small area on Afrofuturism, and they included us there.
Yeah. And how did they find you?
I was actually doing some other work with them, in terms of spray can art. And they got wind of that. That's something that we do. Showed them a couple pictures of the TIE fighter with the Kenta, and they was like, we want that. And so we built a set, stuck it in there, a mini hangar.
Mm-hmm. And this mini hangar, is this the same size as the thing that you guys put at... Did you go to a Comic-Con? And it
No,
was
it was like really small. I mean,
Okay.
I think we made it. This is, if you can imagine, 9 VHS tapes stuck together.
Okay.
You know, in an L form.
So basically, you're looking at like about a 3x3 footprint of just kind of like a little bit of it.
Yeah, if that.
Not even that.
Okay.
Yeah, not even that.
Okay.
Because it was more, I would say more like a 1x2 or something like that. But
Okay. But then you guys did a bigger thing, like you were talking about a 17 foot.
So our Star Destroyer has grown over the last 4 years from like a, I don't know, 1 by something to this 14-foot long hangar. It's basically 2.5 tables, 6-foot tables stuck together. So 6-foot tables, 12, and then there's like another little 2-foot piece on the side. And it's all VHS tapes. In terms of the structure,
Sure.
there's a lot of other intricacies. I mean, we use everything from computer parts to just magnets for the refrigerator. Like it's
Sure.
really.
You're just like finding the shapes that speak to what you want to do. And it's like sometimes even not
Interesting
necessarily just
continuous
figure out how it's
paneling.
like caps and
Yeah.
plastic food containers and
There's a whole tutorial on how to make cargo barrels out of water bottle tops on our YouTube. So check out the Dark Star Universe YouTube.
Yeah.
For some cool tutorials. We'll be putting some more of that stuff up too. So yeah.
We're also in conversation right now with the Oakland Museum. They're doing an Afrofuturist exhibition coming up this year in the fall. And they're going to have us in there with a feature of our shorts in terms of the stop motion animation, as well as a larger diorama than we did last time.
Okay, how much can you say much about it or
Well, we'll just say the diorama is going to be twice the size, at least, that it was before.
Okay.
And the animation is going to be an extension, so there'll be an additional episode to the episode that we have now.
So like specific for that installation you have an episode.
Yes, that'll be the premiere
Okay.
of that episode.
Got it.
But it'll be the next episode from what we just did.
Okay.
So we're extending it. So with the editing may be a little different. So ultimately, it's still one episode. It's just longer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we're also doing an audio experience. So when people walk up to the diorama, they're able to put headphones on and experience the sounds of what's happening in that diorama. We won't reveal what that is yet, but so they'll get to have an audio experience too. So it's a lot going on in the next few months with Dark Star. So
that's really cool.
Definitely check us out, tap in. We'll have a lot of behind the scenes on our Instagram. Definitely check out the GoFundMe and donate if you're able. Everything is welcome. We're also looking for donations of VHS tapes.
Yeah. Well, the one thing is like I'm walking around and I'm looking at this displays that you have, and it's just so I do found object sculpture, so I'm always about finding that little part, and I'm looking around. I was like, oh, look at these VHS tapes are like perfect. And the funny thing I think is this like younger kids probably don't know what the hell a VHS tape is.
No.
It's like I instantly see it, but then it's like I could recognize it, but then I see how you fixed it, and it's like the perfect piece. Not only the thickness for walls, but the aesthetic, the textures, all these things work really well. So when a younger kid comes along and you say VHS tape or something,
they have no idea. Like the parents know, but they have no idea. Or at least unless their parents have saved like those old Disney movies and let them watch them as a kid, and that was me. I mean, my kids were kind of growing up in the kind of DVD age, but
you
I was
keep that
still
VCR with
I was
the
still
old Disney.
exactly.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
still
yeah.
had all the VHS tapes with the Disney, and so one of my kids' favorite movie was James and the Giant Peach, which is a stop motion animation produced by I believe Leica, and they would just play that thing over and over and over, and they were just so fascinated by it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of where the love for stop motion came from my son, is just, watching that over and over and over.
Right.
And seeing it being done with, Star Wars toys on YouTube.
So what kind of advice would you say if somebody's interested in getting into this kind of thing? What would you have liked to have known as you got started, that now that you're coming, like you've had this experience? Do you have any type of things that you would offer to somebody who... I know it's kind of a hard question to answer sometimes, but...
I mean, for me personally, I've really enjoyed this experience. I don't necessarily think I would do it in a different way, except to really impress upon young people or anyone interested in getting involved with this to seek out the community of folks that are into this, to get as much knowledge and information from those who have experience doing this, to be around you, like build community. It's a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun doing it when I started it alone, but when I connected with Korise and we began to build our Dark Star team, it's even better. It's totally enriching. When you got multiple imaginations and minds thinking about one project, it adds perspective and it helps really grow something into something beautiful. So I'm having fun. And that's the main thing I would say. Have fun doing whatever it is you're doing related to this. Build community.
Yeah. The one thing I really like about collaboration, especially if you have a vision for something and then somebody else comes in and you think you're talking the same language, but then all of a sudden it's executed a little differently, it then becomes not yours, but ours.
Yeah.
And then you see it's like, oh, I wouldn't have ever thought of how to do that. And then, like you're saying, if you're bringing a TIE fighter to somebody for a third party or another person, they're like weathering it, and it's like, damn, I never knew it could look like that.
Right.
So the idea of just putting that seed out there and everybody watering it and bringing it and nurturing it, and all of a sudden it becomes this thing that not one mind could have ever come up with, but it's like a communal effort.
Definitely.
That's the thing that's always like really impressed me with like that type of community project, and I feel like you guys have so many different communities at work here. And like you have the pop culture community, you have like just like the Oakland community, you guys have just like the Afrocentric community, just figuring out like how all these pieces fit together and are like becoming probably like its own new thing.
And even the music community, I mean, some of the voice actors are actually musicians. So Martin Luther, who, toured with the Roots and did some stuff with the Roots years ago, and Ryan Nicole, who's a local female MC. And
phenomenal.
And she's also she does a show on Coffee called I Remember That Song that comes on Saturday mornings. And so she's, this kind of personality, and so she's she played a couple of the female characters in the piece, and some other local artists that are, they were like, sure, I'll do a voiceover. And so and then Hadari Davis, who's also a contributor on as a co-writer on some of the stuff that we're gonna be working on in the future, and definitely, and so yeah.
Cool. So outside of that, is there anything else that you guys want to talk about or say about Dark Star, or anything else in general, just like collaboration or the whatever, the storytelling, or I don't know.
Just expect some flavor. When you watch films like Star Wars, even some of the voice acting sometimes may have a British normative accent with some of the characters. So imagine something that is that's in the black vernacular, or something that's in the more African vernacular. So we're going to be working with a whole nother kind of flavor. There are some things that overlap. I know you mentioned earlier that some of the structures we had over there reminded you of Tatooine, but Tatooine is also inspired by African architecture.
Yeah.
So we dip it into some of the same ponds with that inspiration, but our spin and our take on it is going to be unique.
Okay. We'll be able to see the short you guys produce at the Mo Stop Mo Fest. Thanks, guys. It's really cool. I'm excited to post some of the photos on this podcast associated with that, but also just to kind of like link up with all of your stuff so we could kind of keep this thing going, because it's pretty cool.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you coming out and taking the time and showing some interest in what we're doing, man. It's been fun.
Yeah, well, I mean, I walk in here and it's like you see this kind of stuff. I was like, oh, it feels like a robe, you just feel comfortable. It's like, oh, this is nice. Okay, I can hang out in here for like 20 hours straight.
Yeah, I mean, people come over and it's kind of a vortex. People get sucked in and they don't want to leave. They're like, wow,
yeah,
you have that. Oh, you made this. Oh, wow, this is awesome. Da 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 da.
Right.
Yeah, so it's really cool, how we have been working on it.
It's a bright day for a dark star.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, thanks, guys.